Okay, let's start then. A very warm welcome from the Civil Society Academy International to this panel discussion on the mega trends NGOs must watch. So my name is Sohini Paul, and I'm with the Civil Society Academy since the last more than 10 years now. And the reason why we are organizing this mega trends is to celebrate our 10th anniversary. So we began our journey towards the end of 2014 and we have completed 10 years now. And to celebrate this important milestone in our journey, we are doing this panel discussion. And we are very, very happy to have three eminent panelists with us today to share their thoughts, their opinions on the mega trends. So, before we begin and before I hand it over to my colleague, I would just like to briefly introduce our panelists to you. So, firstly, we have Mr. Amitabh Behar, who is the Executive Director of Oxfam International. Mr. Behar is a global civil society leader with decades of experience in human rights, economic inequalities, governance, accountability, philanthropy, democracy, social justice, and building citizen participation. He has been the vice chair of the board of Civicus, which is a global alliance of civil society organizations. And he has also served as the chair of several other organizations in India as well as internationally, including the Global Fund for Community Foundation, the International Civil Society Center, and the Norwegian Human Rights Fund. We will hear about his opinion on the mega trend shortly. Our second panelist today is Miss Wanjiru Gikonyo from Kenya. She is a board member of the Kenya Human Rights Commission. Ms. Wanjiru is an advocate and coach for transformative governance, passionately committed to fostering just and equitable societies. With over 20 years of experience and expertise in citizen led accountability, public participation, and social accountability, she has significantly advanced governance in Kenya. Wanjiru is the founder of the Institute of Social Accountability, TISA, a leading NGO she helmed from its inception in 2008 until 2022, demonstrating her dedication to leadership development and institutional strengthening. Our third panelist today is Markus Matiaschek, who is the founder of ZeroHunger.ai. Markus is a hands-on AI and data lead and founder of ZeroHunger.ai, which is a non-profit software initiative advancing the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, and human rights. With more than 25 years of professional IT experience, he has advised business, government agencies, and NGOs, successfully leading cross-functional teams to develop data pipelines and AI solutions for global impact. Markus spearheaded the Wealth Hunger Hilfe Child Growth Monitor, an AI-driven app that identifies malnourished children, assembling a team of 20 and securing substantial funding. He is an expert in software engineering and IT business strategy and has worked across Europe, Africa, India, and Latin America. Driven by a passion for technology's potential in social good, he now consults for NGOs and fast growing organizations on data and AI strategy. So we are really happy to have our three panelists today from three different areas. And I would now like to hand it over to my colleague Joachim to take the discussion forward on the mega trends. Thanks again to everyone for joining our panel discussion today.
Thank you so much, Suhini. This is really fantastic. Thanks again, Amitabh, Markus, Wanjiru, for joining us. Yeah, this is really yeah, an honor to have you here. When I was trying to research for the session, yeah, on mega trends, I found the following quote. Maybe I want to show you. Uh, so, the future is a dance between patterns and events. And during the last days, I was researching patterns. And of course, the events have just been coming up over the last weeks, yeah, with the Trump election, also during the last year with the war in Gaza. So things are changing, the patterns are changing. Yeah. So while I did the research for our megatrends, I was really changing again and again the patterns and also the events that I thought could come in the future. Yeah, it's such a time of change. Um, so the patterns is basically what we are trying to put in our head in order to foresee what the future will be like. Yeah, there's a pattern of inequality or of AI, but the events are things we can't really foresee. So some of the events are changing the patterns in ways that we couldn't foresee. Let me just have a look at some of the patterns. So I start with the top. So I put here 7 patterns. Yeah, and it's really a selection which we made from the Civil Society Academy. I think there could be a lot of other patterns which would be important for NGOs and which NGOs should watch and influence. But definitely there is an artificial intelligence pattern or a trend. There are new ways to collaborate. There's a changing and emerging civil society. There are new funding models. There are new development paradigms, new development challenges, and an emerging world order, which is also changing, which will also change over the next 20 and 25 years quite radically. So in our little graphic, we put here 2000 to 2050. So conveniently, we're in the middle now in 2025. Yeah, and I'm just going maybe very shortly through the different trends which we identified. So the emerging world order, of course, one of the things that I think changed quite a lot in our heads is the Brexit and the Trump win in 2016, and also a trend towards more authoritarian regimes. So we can clearly see this also in number. These are numbers from the Economist intelligence unit. But the emerging world order will also be influenced by new demographics and by China being the largest economy, probably in about a little bit more than 10 years. When it comes to new development challenges, I have here as the first the war in Syria. 5,000 migrants per year drowned in the Mediterranean in 2015. This was quite shocking, and it showed how new development challenges will actually also come to us and influence our work. Yeah. So there are different other things, but something which is in particularly important, I think, for our work is the increase in armed conflicts. So from 80 in 2010 to 176 here in, I think this is 2023. Yeah, so a huge increase in armed conflict, which of course is critical to NGOs, international NGOs, and how we are reacting and what we are doing. Here, while extreme poverty is going down, there is a clear trend that inequality surges. Amitabh, I've seen a lot of Oxfam, not adverts, a lot of Oxfam messages on LinkedIn about it. And of course, the other big challenge is the 2-degree global warming, which we also as NGOs have to deal with. And who knows, maybe we can also influence it to a certain degree. New development paradigms. Here, Professor Yunus the emerging of social businesses, universal basic income, and also the grand bargain for the localization of humanitarian aid. I think these are some of the trends or some of the patterns that have been important for us. Clearly connected to the amount of conflict is the emergence of the triple nexus. So people are talking about this increasingly, about how peace building can actually be combined with humanitarian aid and also development. Yeah, but there are also other things like accountability platforms and the whole aid efficiency or aid effectiveness debate, which is also coming into this. New funding models. When in my earlier days of my career, crowdfunding platforms started, then philanthropy was getting big and is still big. It's one of the mega trends, I guess, in funding models. But there is also new funding models, especially everything related to climate change, I think will be influencing the funding models and also the fund flows into the global south in the next years with bonds for NGOs, green bonds, or also climate impact funds. In the emergency world, we can expect that there will be a universal digital currency for aid. These, of course, are predictions. Nobody knows whether this is happening, but I think the way is going into this direction. Emerging civil society. Here I just go, in the around 2010 Arab Spring, WikiLeaks was founded. Then Fridays for Future came. There's a rise in digital activism. And then in 2030, this is a prediction, large NGOs transform into localized networks. I think I can see that many NGOs are actually struggling these days with the idea on how to localize or how to take localization serious. So what does this mean for the organization? We can hope that there is a global citizen movement coming up maybe in the 2030s, which will be strong and maybe coming in as a result of all the more authoritarian regimes which we can see establishing. You see, I'm going very much into the broad. I'm looking from, I'm zooming out here and try to develop here a few thoughts on how the world can change or could change and how that would influence us as NGOs. So on new ways to collaborate. So this has not so much to do actually with NGOs, but of course we are also working with the ways, with the new ways of actually working together. For example, Google Docs was launched in 2006. So this changes in a way also how we are working. And if you take the collaboration patterns forward, probably sometimes in the next 20, 30 years, we will have also holographic collaboration or the metaverse. So this will also change how we are actually interacting with each other, but also with our target groups. And lastly, here's a stream of artificial intelligence. IBM Watson wins Jeopardy. This was in 2011. And then, of course, OpenAI started with ChatGPT in 2020. Each of us was probably excited the first time using ChatGPT and seeing how powerful this is and can become in the future. But this will have deep impacts, the artificial intelligence revolution, if you want so, on how we do work. So one of the predictions could be that AI is actually solving some or helps solving some of the challenges in the future, like in education and health, maybe contributing significantly to universal education as children have access directly, maybe virtually, but directly to at least primary education. So these are some of the trends I wanted to show. We have been inviting here our panelists, and I think each of the panelists has probably a certain view and thinks that certain trends are more important than others. These, of course, are only trends that we we're seeing and that we are actually monitoring. But I think there could be also, of course, many other trends, and probably each of you thinks now that we have forgotten very important ones. Yeah. So, but this is basically a first draft and something we wanted to show also to host the session. So I would like to hand over to Amitabh. Amitabh, you're coming, I think, from the World Economic Forum, if I can, as you said, and so this was last week. So I think we would be interested to hear a little bit which trends you see are the most critical, and maybe also to describe this a little bit in the backdrop of the World Economic Forum, which you have attended last week.
Thank you, Joachim, and thank you for inviting me. I hope my voice is clear.
Very clear.
Okay, great. So first, let me start by congratulating the Civil Society Academy for the first decade. It's no small achievement. I've been a partner of this journey from almost probably day one, so I really feel happy and privileged to be a co-traveler with you. So congratulations to all of you. And thank you. I know we have limited time, so let me quickly jump into the question that you have. And let me first say that the slide that you shared is fantastic. I was just thinking that I'll share it with my senior leadership team so that we are able to, in one slide, look at 7 big trends. So, Joachim, I would not disagree with any of that. I would pretty much agree, but maybe, and I'll probably talk of the same things, but maybe the articulation would be slightly different. But let me just take all of us to the moment that we are in. And because you talked of the World Economic Forum, I'm coming from there. We released our new inequality report. And in that, let me just say one fact and link it with even last year, we had one of our killer facts. Last year, we had the top 5 billionaires double their wealth, where 60% of the global population had become poorer. This year, the billionaires have added $2 trillion to their kitty, and there are 3.6 billion people, that's 44% of humanity, which still lives under the poverty line. So, like you said, the extreme poverty has come down, but there are 3.6 billion people living below poverty line, and this is the same number that was in 1990. This is, say, a big picture, but just to borrow a phrase from the World Economic Forum, they often use a phrase polycrisis, and you kind of indicated to that. But the levels of, I'll not go into the data because you kind of talked of it, but the levels of hunger, or let me just say that also. At the moment, there are 733 million people who sleep hungry. They do not get 3 square meals. And what is really important to note is that in the last 5 years, these numbers have gone up by 152 million. So hunger has actually grown. Conflicts, Gaza is as heart-wrenching as one could ever imagine, but you're seeing conflict rise across. Climate catastrophe is not in the future. In the last 1 year, I've been traveling around the world, and I actually now meet climate refugees. And we continue to see rise of authoritarian regimes. So in this, let me just quickly and do tell me when my time is up, the 5 minutes. So I want to talk of 5 specific trends. I'll be brief but happy to elaborate later. The first, I think, and they're not necessarily in a order. If I had more time, maybe I would have structured it. But the first, I think there's a clear normative shift that's happened. The normative liberal post-war consensus at the moment is fundamentally being challenged. And it has never been challenged like this. And certainly post the collapse of Berlin Wall, there was a reasonable amount of global consensus around what the normative values of society, polity are going to be. But that's completely collapsing now. And that has such a fundamental impact on all the trends that we are talking of. Because if you don't have your core normative values, the moral compass clear, if we look at it differently, then the trajectories that we will look at are going to be very different. You could not have imagined Trump, an American president, say what he said yesterday, that we'll just ensure that people from Gaza can be taken away to some other place, as if it's just a real estate that you're talking about. Uh, this was just not thinkable. But there's that normative shift. So that's one. It has huge impacts on democracy, and democracy is the fundamental bedrock for civil society. So I just want to make that link that we are part of a democratic architecture. If liberal democracies are under threat, and that's what I see, civil society, the way we understand, is not going to be existing. It's clearly a product of that democratic architecture. So that's the big trend one. Second, and these are all linked, I see almost a complete victory of the neoliberal agenda unleashed in the 90s or even earlier. So, pretty much starting from Thatcher and Reagan, what you're seeing now is a complete, at least a victory in terms of narratives, in terms of ideas, and we are left with almost no alternatives. So everybody who pretty much, even civil society, all of us have started thinking within that framework of neoliberalism. So, and that's what is getting reflected in what I talked of in the economic inequality, the concentration of wealth, but that gets uh, demonstrated in multiple ways. Our report is now saying this is not just about inequality. We are moving towards billionaire supremacy, and billionaire supremacy is essentially about oligarchies. And what oligarchies do is weaken democracies, weaken people's trust in institutions, which then leads to unrest, political instability, breakdown of social cohesion, and all that is happening. And you couldn't have had I was going to say a better example, but a worse example than an Elon Musk, who has done what he has done in the US, but he's coming to your country also. Just yesterday,
Mm.
he was, yesterday or day before, he was in a AFD meeting.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah,
Mm.
it is, but that's what soon to be trillionaire actually going and influencing political processes with his money and with his ideas. Unthinkable that few of these people who have such tremendous power is what, if you look at Trump's inauguration, the richest people are sitting in front, and they're the pretty much the jewel in the crown. So that's the second big one. But what it has done is we have started internalizing a lot of this move to the neoliberal framework. Look at the civil society boards. Oh, let's get a couple of people from the corporate world. How do we work on our issues more on efficiency, less on solidarity, and so on? So the whole framework of how you work moves away from what was a human-rooted, compassion, solidarity-based approach to efficiency, market-based approaches. So that's a massive shift. The third, which we're already seeing, which is not even a mega trend for long term, it is happening now, which is look at Trump withdrawing from WHO. I assume everybody would have seen the US aid letter, which is essentially saying stopping aid. And it's unthinkable the direct impact the civil society would have. And there's going to be a massive cut in our resources across. So the aid industry, which flourished in the 90s, and we were all beneficiaries in many ways. You can critique it, but we were all working with it. That's going to come to an end with the shift of governments to the right, the ODA will come down, etc. So the money in the civil society, the way we have been used to, the large NGOs, including us, we've had billions of dollars of work. I'm sure we've done very good work. Everybody has done good work, but that's going to dramatically change. So that's the third big one. I'll quickly, I know my time must be up, so very quickly. The fourth is that I do feel, on the trend that you talked of civil society, just one step further, that what you're seeing is not localized NGOs, not just localized NGOs, but spontaneous people's movement. You talked of Arab Spring, but I see that it continues. It has continued. So just look at last year. In Nairobi, you saw that. In Bangladesh, you have seen that, and it continues. So there's this spontaneous people's movement happening, sudden energy, unorganized. Therefore, you don't know what shape it will take and what will follow that. And the fifth, which we have, I'm sure, we all experience, I have personally experienced it, the repressive state, the shrinking of civic space, regulatory spaces becoming more and more difficult, essentially making the work of any kind of questioning and holding power to account difficult. So that role of civil society, which was of playing the watchdog role, is not working. It's not being allowed, as you talked of more and more authoritarian regimes. So that's reshaping. At best, you are allowed to do service delivery, that too on our terms, but otherwise, this is not happening. And all this is happening. Let me just end to come back to from where I started, is the threat to the liberal democracies. And it also means that the idea of the welfare state itself is fundamentally changing. Thanks.
Thanks, Amitabh. Let me go to Wanjiru. Wanjiru, we can't see your video right now. Yeah, wonderful. So you have heard Amitabh speaking about basically this changing landscape. One of it was the spontaneous people's movement. I'm sure you have also listened up when he was talking about this in Kenya, and also repressive space, and also the news. I think there are specific news on social media coming out of Kenya. And I know that you have worked on accountability on human rights for many, many years now. So what are your perspectives on those mega trends? Yeah, yeah.
Thank you very much, Joachim, and congratulations on 10 years with CSA. It's an honor to be on this panel. And I associate so completely with what Amitabh has shared. I'm tempted to say nothing and just continue the conversation. But because I'm on the panel, I'll add a few, and I'll apologize if there are any overlaps. But based on the work that I've done, and Joachim, you're familiar with some of this, on debt accountability. More recently, I'm also looking at climate financing of the climate agenda. Also, I've been looking at the protest in Kenya in terms of what does this mean? How do you move from protest to transformation? Because there's this, these youth protests that have emerged and are very powerful, and have actually dislodged us as civil society. We've been advocating for citizen governance for the longest time. And in Kenya, what we found is, the traditional civic education that we used to do, curate and strategize and plan, was being done real time by young people using digital technology, and they were turning information, data and information into political messages in a matter of hours and days. And, sitting back, I was like, this is really a double-edged sword, because we've been fighting for an active citizenry. And in Kenya, and I think, Joachim, you're aware, Amitabh, I'm sure if you, Oxfam works in Kenya, you'll be familiar. One of the things we kept decrying, because we have a very progressive constitution, is asking where are the people? And we had this sense of where we'd categorize citizens as apathetic. And then suddenly the citizens woke up. And it is not the NGOs. I mean, of course, NGOs played a role, but these were organic citizen movements with they were even more frontline than the human rights defenders, but the human rights defenders played a very important role in then protecting the space, coming to leverage. The social justice centers then came center stage. So really the big question that emerges is, what is the continued role of NGOs? Because there's organic movements, there's then organized groups that have held the space and haven't been very active, but have huge numbers. Like if you talk about trade associations, if you look at the cooperatives, the traditional movements. So in your excellent presentation, I saw you, and I've really flipped my discussion, and I thought, let me just flow with the ideas as Amitabh had shared, and as your question. Looking at what is happening on the ground, the question becomes, what's the continued role of NGOs? And I don't really think it's about large NGOs coming to the ground, because there are movements on the ground. It's really us asking what needs to be done to enable and support. And what we, I've done a little bit of research, not that much, a few conversations here and there. In our work as NGOs, we possibly didn't do enough building and strengthening of the social movements. And we need to strengthen those social movements, because how well grounded are they in the normative framework? So in Kenya, you had a situation where we saw that social media influencers were supporting the Trump election because they imagined that Trump is then going to challenge the Kenyan regime, which they want to get rid of. So, this is a total normative disconnect. And it continues in many other things. So it just shows this social movement is working very well now, but studies show us that it can be repurposed for other goals if not well grounded. So yes, there's a spring, but even the lessons from the Middle East show us that these springs are very fragile. And the question we need to ask is, how do we augment this? Linked to that, and I think, Joachim, you mentioned this in your presentation, is we've ignored the localized governance, local level governance. We've given it lip service because I think as NGOs, we know it, and a lot of us found our work on devolved, decentralized, effective, localized governance. We've done a bit, but not enough. I'm sure if we did an analysis of the resources allocated into strengthening local governance, we'd see that it hasn't been proportionate to the need. So that the vulnerabilities as we go into the poly crisis, the vulnerabilities at the local level are so high in terms of lack of strong social structures, lack of strong social movements on the ground, lack of information, lack of basic services. So as we are moving into AI technology, there are large parts of the population that are struggling with those basics that need to be right, because if you don't have that foundation, then you really can't talk about development. You can't talk about, any sort of inclusive growth. Maybe a third theme, and Amitabh touched on this, and I'll just reframe it, about the neoliberal agenda that has consolidated itself. And even now, as we are talking about the Pact of the Future, and we are talking about, there's been a big push by civil society. I know Oxfam has been at the forefront of that. The Africa Tax Justice Network, AfroDads, about democratizing and bringing justice to the global economic structure, the global financial system. This is a big conversation. But even as we have that conversation, we then see that the International Development Conference that's planned has then brought in language from the neoliberal system, and the financiers, big development finance, have gotten into the conversation so that they make sure the restructuring still protects the large capitalist financial interests. So I think our big question is, how do we dismantle? How do we address this big challenge that's emerged with the plutocracy? I saw the word broligarchy, the hegemony of big technology that has now partnered with politics to really drive a capitalist, a neoliberal agenda through privatization and other means. Some of the solutions, there's talk about the circular economy, which is still part of, it's kind of like, there's a school of thought that says, well, this is a way to kind of soften the blow of neoliberalism. Because if you want to look at the economic system, you need to look at it from the economic point of view, you need to look at it from the social point of view, the political point of view, you need to look at the entire system. So entire systems approach towards food sovereignty, towards climate justice are required. So we need to reframe our programs as civil society, because some of our programs, as Amitabh said, are framed so much in the neoliberal agenda. Mm. Maybe the last thing is on climate, the climate issue, and really the pervasive greenwashing in terms of the proposals that are being put forward. We have a case in the East African court, and one of the arguments we make is, one, we don't have enough information, but the little information we have is that this is an agenda for greenwashing, deepening the debt crisis of, this is a Kenya case, but the same is applicable. There are other similar cases for Ethiopia, and I believe either Tanzania or Zambia was putting one, where we say that this form of financing, they look like green bonds, they look like climate swaps, look very attractive, but really, it's the same agenda of extracting our capital. It's the same IFF conversation. So, so on the climate front, we need to look at that and maybe move away from the language of localizing aid, because really there's capital extraction happening on so many levels through odious debt, IFF's corruption, greenwashing, that the aid discussion was flipped. I think the Africa Tax Justice Network talked about stop the bleeding, and we will have enough for us to do our development. So we really need to internalize those. Yeah. Sorry, I've gone on a bit. Thank you.
Oh, it was wonderful. Yeah, I can totally connect that you're saying that the aid shouldn't be localized, but the theft should be stopped first. Yeah, I mean, this is really something. I also connect to the discussion you had on the enabling spontaneous people movement and actually supporting them in a positive way. This has been actually one of the questions at Civil Society Academy we were asking us all the time. And I'm afraid we have just found a few puzzle pieces on how to do that, and haven't really found very, very good answers, I have to admit. But we can come back, I think, to those questions in the second round. Let me first go to Markus. So Markus, I think it's really fantastic to have you here, because I'm sure you'll bring a completely new perspective in from a technology side. So I'll invite you to share your thoughts about the trends, and also connected to what Amitabh and Wanjiru were talking about.
Yeah, and hi, I'm Markus from Zero Hunger. I'm really glad to be here. Thank you for having me, Joachim, and congratulations to what you've built with the CSA. I do want to bring another perspective as well, because I do think the dystopia we're heading for is kind of obvious, and it's seen. We're going there with seeing eyes, and it's basically now is the time for action. There's no excuses because things are only gonna get worse. Like we're not gonna have more funds for impact and so on. Really, there's no excuse in taking action, I would say. Yeah, I would put it like that. And it's you can look at it from also a very pessimistic point of view. I absolutely acknowledge that. It's sometimes also I'm thinking like what's going on? We're heading for like Terminator, the movie, like scenarios coming about through businesses building autonomous, intelligent organizations, and the real world manifestation of AI through robots and in the digitalized processes, and countries deploying autonomous weapon systems increasingly and so on. So it's really sometimes you have to shake your head and sometimes you think like what's going on. But also I do think the billionaires and the people in power from politics and also rich people who have the influence, which was laid out quite well, also understand that we're all living on the same world, and Mars is not is no refugee for them. They maybe can go to low Earth orbit or something, but it's really we're living all on the same planet, and we have to get along. And so I do think the incentives are there to make things better, and also. So this is where I'm getting into my more optimistic, hopefully, view. Things have never been better for creating change, for creating new things. We have a lot of people working on making the AI open source. And it's easier than ever to use it, build your own things, to use them to support civil society. Also, there is a lot of value-driven people, I think, and organizations also who need to tip the scales towards a more favorable future and are doing it. And the ease of doing that for one person, I think, is easier than ever before. The information is freely available. What we kind of lack is in the sector in general, it's I would say, yeah, it is the civil society and the funding also, or that comes with that. Like I do think if we rely only on institutional funding, that's not the way forward. What we need to do is build, like, find the right impact-driven people, value-driven people who don't care about getting rich, but really care about a future for our children and for the planet, and allow them to work on something meaningful, something useful. People really want to do that, but there is not a lot of jobs out there who allow you to do that. People are working for banks then, for the big research organizations, which is still kind of good, but also for the big businesses who build AI. And their goals are capitalist goals. And we've known for quite some time already that what these capitalist organizations do is privatize the profits and spread out the negative basic all the cost, yeah, to society. And so what I'm trying to do also with Zero Hunger AI and before is kind of provide a path for people to start working on goals which are it's not going to make you rich, probably, but we need to be able to promise a comfortable life to the people who really want to dedicate their life to these things. And there are so many people who want to do this, and so many, especially in the IT sector, people working with AI and everything, so many people come up to me and ask me, how can I do something good? How can I contribute? So getting the sectors together, was always a goal of me. But I fear if the only way to pay those people who want to do good is to employ them and through institutional funding, it doesn't work. So we need impact organizations, and there we need to develop new business models. I think that is coming. And who knows how all those factors play together with the universal basic income. Sam Altman of OpenAI is a big proponent because he knows people need money, or they can't give him the money. They can't give the businesses, the capitalist organizations, the money, right? And it needs to come from somewhere. Organizations are building now basically data centers which run at the moment, like you and I can run like small organizations of autonomous agents who achieve a goal. You define the goal, and the agents collaborate and work together. And I mean, I do this for simple stuff, running my business, like automation, that my chatbots can get my emails, check the invoices, upload them to the tax software, the business process automation, simple things, but increasingly it's also product development, software development. You need an app, that achieves certain goals. You just have to define them well, and the AI will build it. And organizations are building now organizations consisting of AI, but it's gonna be basically the new next milestone is basically countries full of super intelligent agents which are working in a data center towards a goal. So who's defining that goal? It's right now, it's the businesses, it's the capitalists, it's same. So that's not going great, I would say. And this is also, but this is a big opportunity for the purpose-driven organizations, because this is becoming now really valuable to have really purposeful goals and impactful goals, and also the monitoring and evaluation to know if the impact or what impact is happening, positive impact, negative impact, and so on. So kind of the guardrails also, and making sure that these autonomous organizations and robots and whatnot will do what they are meant to do for humanity. And so I do think that NGOs can play a big role. One, in providing purpose, providing valuable goals, and also the ethical oversight, monitoring, and evaluation to make sure that those are achieved. And one important thing there is then AI and new ways to collaborate. The trends here is, of course, more and more we're collaborating with AI. And you have to make sure also that you can do that and that you own all your data. That's the last thing. So the start of an AI strategy is data sovereignty and making sure your knowledge, your organization's data, your conversations, your operational knowledge, this is going to be really valuable, that this is documented, that you have access to it, and you can build these autonomous organizations and transform your organization into an organization that collaborates with AI to achieve those impact goals, so sustainable development goals, and so on.
Okay. Wow, my head is spinning. So
it has been a lot. I think
I think in future there will be so much to do. Maybe I ask Amitabh first, maybe in a couple of minutes. So how can we positively influence these trends, or how can we even maybe use some of them, and in order to help contributing to maybe something positive out of all these doom scenarios that will come out with something positive in the end. So this is, I think, the question: what can we do?
Thank you. Yes, this has been a very, very good session. Let me try and be brief, and as you said, look at the positive. I hope we all recognize, as Markus said, it's a dystopia already. So let's work on the positives. And I want to talk of 3 or 4 specific things, but I'll do it in 2 minutes. One, and I'm going to be very, very meta level, Joachim. One, bring back politics to the work we do. Let's be clear that the work we do is not professional, technical, managerial. This is about politics. This is about how do you shape politics, change politics, and for us, from the perspective of ordinary, marginalized, excluded, vulnerable people and communities. I think that's going to be a massive thing, and we have got distracted from that. The second, bring back the normative worldview that I was talking of. It's fundamental, as in, how can we not link our actions every minute with human dignity or justice, equality, freedom? There's so many of our actions which we end up still doing, which do not in any ways promote these. And we are part of that larger system, knowingly sometimes saying, oh, let's do this. But I think that clarity of that normative framework has to be central. How did all of us respond to when Gaza happened? Is a question that we must ask. We have to ask that question. Otherwise, we can't sleep comfortably. The third, I think, which is critical for us to understand, that this will not, and I think that's a big shift that I'm proposing, is we will need to recognize as civil society, we will be wounded in these struggles. For us to believe that you can protect all your institutional interest, the size that we have, the dollars that flow in, and be able to challenge power is not going to happen. We will be wounded. Let's have much more courage if we're going to go into this path. That's the third. I think it's a massive shift that I'm proposing. Most organizations do not have the courage. Once they become organizations, they lose the courage. And as Wanjiru was saying, it's those young people who then kind of elbow us out because we don't have the courage to really speak truth to power, to challenge power the way it needs to be challenged. So that's the third. The fourth, I would say, is we're all really good at analysis. We know what the structural causes are. We've just heard from all 4 of us have looked at the structural causes, but largely our programs end up delivering band-aid solutions. So you try and address the manifestation and not the structural causes. Because yes, it's difficult. How do we do that? It then starts threatening your institutional interest, etc., etc. But I do think that would be really critical. And then build on trends that we already have. Decolonization is a critical conversation. I'm not happy with localization because localization can still be colonial and you localize it. Decolonization and decoloniality is critical. So the mindset needs to change. The gender movement, the women's rights movement, there are huge sparks of resistance. How do we work with them together? And it's really a solidarity framework, a collaboration framework, and not a competition framework with a broad rainbow coalition is what I think is needed. Thanks.
Thanks, Amitabh. It's really inspiring. So, Wanjiru, can you connect to those thoughts?
Oh, totally. I'm not sure I can add very constructively to them. As you can see, I've been nodding furiously because I'm in total agreement. Really starting from what Markus said, and I love the idea that we need to look at new funding models. There's an opportunity, there's a question about how we continue to advance our work using AI and how we fund that. So I totally associate with the proposal that Markus made. And that's something that I'm very keen on. And I think that is where we will find the elusive employment that we are seeking, because part of the spring is coming from high unemployment. And so if we can, as civil society actors, figure this out, we can then create employment. The second thing is there are a lot of very positive pilots. There, for instance, last year I was part of a conversation on food systems in Kenya, and it was focusing on one particular county. But that was a very, a very systemic, very thorough proposition. So there are so many good models that we can now use and begin to champion and move away from focusing on the problem identification. So I think we need to capture the imagination of the public that we want to move into, to bring back into a democratic and possibly even craft a new normative framework by using examples of what has worked. So our narratives and our solutions, I think we need to be more proactive in that. Like I said, the third point for me is the social movement, and how to deepen and strengthen that. And it's so interesting, Amitabh, that you talked about bringing back politics into civil society, because I've been trying to convince a couple of movements, civil society movements, to deepen their social movements. It's a very hard sell, because really the gatekeeping starts with the NGO sector. But I'm hoping there's one progressive team that have seen the need to do this. So we need to get the existing movements to work more effectively and bring space for those social movements. Maybe my last thing, because I don't really have much to add, I associate with that, is just to reiterate, there's a very good paper by Delanty of 2021, and the central tenet is that social movements are the principal agents of major social transformations. And social transformation is rooted in social struggle. So the work we are doing is entirely valid. We simply need to believe more in it and pick these new approaches to create the new paradigm. So the dystopia may be the reality, but it's not our inevitable way forward. We simply need to organize ourselves more intentionally. And Markus, I think you called it very rightly, we may need to do that outside of the resource base that we are used to as civil society actors. Yeah, thank you. I'll stop there.
Thanks, Wanjiru. Yes, sometimes I feel we're too comfortable. So we have to bring back the struggle, the politics, like Amitabh said, and a strong normative framework to our work, and go out of this comfort zone, know that we are having around us. Yeah, Markus.
Yeah,
What are your thoughts?
I do want to connect to that. I hope, because I think especially the emerging economies, the emerging economies like in Ethiopia, yeah, but also, I mean, countries like India and there is obviously India has made its mark, yeah, in terms of its culture on the Western world. Yeah. I'm really interested, however, in sourcing more forms of collaboration from Africa, from India, from other countries. I think communities is like local communities don't really exist anymore in Germany, for example. We have like these interest communities, but they're not strong socially. There's no strong social bonds, yeah? Not as strong as it used to be. When I go to Africa, especially, I mean, what's obvious is the strong communities, and I mean, they are a lot less individual, a lot of less individualism is allowed, of course. Yeah, maybe we need to have some discussions around there. But there are other concepts of living together, working together, which seem to work well. And right now, there's a lot of focus on like the so-called Western values. I mean, which is basically not even taken too serious by Western countries. It's just a fig leaf for capitalist activities and so on. Yeah? We need to talk about those Western values and be real about like what our countries really do, and also inject like, are there more general human values? Yeah, I think that would be a really good start, and also other ways to collaborate. I think there are really interesting concepts of how people collaborate and how people work together to achieve goals. I heard from Islamic societies in Ethiopia, but also in other countries, about a system where you have kind of a local lottery that is self-organized, right? Where people pay in, and then one family wins, and maybe they can buy then a small kiosk or a goat or whatever. Yeah. And it helps the whole society. There are other models. We need to, I think, source more of them, find out more about them. And I think the people in African countries, in India, the people who live like this, local communities, they need to take, I think, their own culture more seriously, or actually try to make it into something that works, something new that they can believe in and that works in their context. Because what I see a lot now, the past 2 years, I've been to Ethiopia 6 times. So, but I've seen this also in Latin American countries, in Honduras and so on. There's a lot of young people, a lot of IT people. There's a lot of things they can do and so on. But what happens? They organize in companies who barely work and basically do things in a hierarchical way, or they basically do a cargo cult. They see what works for successful businesses. They try to replicate it, but they don't really understand it. Yeah. Or they it's either copycat culture. They try to rebuild businesses that work, yeah, and it's kind of cargo cult, and it almost never works. That doesn't work. So also injecting then more individualistic new work methodologies like agile. I'm struggling a lot with that, but because people do not always want to work in an agile way, and they want hierarchical organization. They want their boss to tell them what to do. In some cases, and in other cases they don't. They suffer. They don't understand it. What about like looking more at how those societies work, what's more rooted in the culture of a country, and can you bring that as innovations also to a global movement? I would be really interested in that, because I think right now that hinders progress a lot in terms of ways of collaboration, ways of working together, that people don't trust too much what has been working culturally, traditionally, maybe for them, and instead look a lot into what has worked in Silicon Valley, and I don't know, in maybe in Europe, but there certainly is a better mixture, or some better way of working together, and we could benefit from them as well. I mean, we have kind of non-profit organizations, and we have strong societies in Germany. But innovation in terms of how to build collaboration is really needed, and how people can collaborate.
Thanks. Fantastic. This was really inspiring. So yeah, there is a culture gap, I think, in the working ways of working actually and collaborating. And I think this is something we also urgently need to take up. I'll go now to Rishi. Rishi, reveal yourself. I think we take another 10 minutes or 15 minutes to look at the questions from the audience.
Yeah.
So, hi, Rishi.
Hi.
Maybe in the meantime, can I say one more thing, just which is more towards AI? I mean, I do a lot care about also collaboration and how humans work together, build products, build software, build AI, and so on. And this is also then important when you collaborate with agents or you build systems of autonomous agents, of course. But in terms of the technological perspective and the AI to build also, we can look into things which maybe weren't sustainable in the past, which haven't worked really well, or yeah. So one example, I'm looking for doing a pilot at the moment, for example, is in India, there's arman.org, a great organization, non-profit, founded by a doctor. They call mothers and they keep in touch with the mothers via telephone through robots, on telephone mainly, but also call centers. This saves lives. A saved life is like less than $800. There are studies that this works, that it is effective, cost effective also. And it's not scaling. It's not scaling because of language barriers, but also because it's not really, there is not a business model behind it, right? If there's a business model, you will have global scale instantly, right? So that's really important, but also we can look at those again. And now using agents, there are new ways to create value. So for example, when we talk to mothers on a weekly basis, to millions of mothers in India, maybe in Africa, it can be on a huge scale. We can not only inform them about the development of the child, we can also gather information of in which villages are a lot of children sick from diarrhea, and maybe we need to look at the infrastructure. Or so we can gather all this data in a structured way, in a much cheaper way, and have new opportunities. So it's also the time to look at older ideas maybe and see, can we make them work now? I think it's also an opportunity. There's so many things.
Fantastic. Yeah. Thanks, Markus. These are really very interesting ideas. Rishi, I wanted to ask you about what did the audience say?
So thanks for the interesting insights. I mean, there are a lot of questions which are coming up, and few have already added, but I was able to summarize few the core questions. And one of the question is basically how can we ensure the ethical foundation of our work, being a CSO, and and remaining relevant in this ever evolving environment and the global challenge which is emerging. And this question to you, Amitabh, is actually specifically asked and knowing and trying to get some more insights upon that, what kind of ethical frameworks which can guide CSOs can emerge, and especially for the responding for the crisis like Gaza and the climate emergencies. How do you see any things which are coming up there? So I will go one by one. I think that's easier, and because the questions are more specific to the panelists. So over to you, Amitabh. If
And Rishi, looking at the time, you would want really brief answers.
yes, very brief answers. Yes.
Okay. So thank you for the questions. It is obviously a question which needs a very long conversation, and it is more about how do we practice our values. It is about living our values. But what I would say is, in a way, I said that we need to get our own North Star right. What is the North Star for a civil society organization? Is it about size? Is it about the money that flows in? Or is it about the vision and mission of our organization? I think that they're two fundamentally different approaches. More and more of the organized NGOs end up having very fancy vision and mission, but their practice is much more about many more projects. How much more projects can we get? How many more employees can we have? And that kind of derails us. So it is really going back to the North Star. We are here, we exist to fundamentally change the power relations, the concentration of power in a few hands to ensuring that it is democratized. That's in a nutshell, and that should drive every action that we have. The way companies keep looking at, ultimately they talk of the 5 Ps: planet, profit, etc., sustainability, but eventually it's profits. On the other hand, how do we ensure that it's justice and people at the center? That's how I would say we can do it. Many of us are committed to it. It is about practicing it. It's going to be a long battle, because, as I was saying, it's a larger framing that there is no alternative to the neoliberal framework. So, it comes from that. It's the hegemony. So, Wanjiru talked of the hegemony. Hegemony is so complete at this moment that you think that, oh, you don't have resources, so you have kind of lost out. And that's where we need to turn our gaze from looking at the power holders. We are constantly trying. Can I get into a BBC media story? Can I get inside the World Bank and meet the president of the World Bank? Let's get our gaze right. That should not be our gaze. It's the people and communities. Let's work with them. They're enormously resilient and strong. Let's channelize that power and energy for making the change that we are talking of. Thanks.
Thanks, Amitabh. So, and this is really insightful. So quickly, I will just reach to Wanjiru. One question is for you. That during the discussion, there was a suggestion that the aid should not be internationalized. So, are you saying that it should be focusing on regions where it is more needed? Basically, what is the model if it is not if it is not internationalized, then how we can actually do it? So that is the question from the uh, attendees.
Okay. I'll answer that in the best way that I can, because the assertion that I made was a comment on the proposition that one of the trends moving forward is how to localize aid. And the point that I then made is that the very concept of aid is misplaced. And we now know that a lot of Africa and the developing countries' capital and resources are extracted illegally through unfair debt management perpetrated by a global system that allows this kind of extraction, through bonds that look like they're supporting climate objectives, but really they are not, through corruption. So there is sanctioned extraction and plunder of resources that Africa and other developing countries need for their development. So that aid is really a platitude coming to kind of ease up the bigger plunder. So the question that has been advanced by a section of civil society since around, I think, 2016, 20 thereabout, is that stop the bleeding. That if this money were available for Africa's development, and if, of course, we dealt with our internal corruption, because that's part of the problem, but fundamentally from a funding system, we are saying Africa needs, the big conversation there is Africa as the rule maker in the global financial system. It is about the justice of the financial economic system that allows forms of corruption that are then legalized. There's ways that the corporate, the multinationals are able to extract profits through very complex mechanisms, shadow companies, and all of that. So this whole architecture is designed to extract money that is needed for development. So aid is the wrong discussion. That is assistentialist, that is colonial, and we are moving into the decolonization. And there was a point I just wanted to clarify that Amitabh had mentioned, and I'll maybe raise it as a question and a clarification, I don't really see a contradiction between the decolonization argument and deepening localization of development. Because in my view, and it's a statement that may sound absolute, all development is local. It's, all projects are initiated at a local point, whether it's funded at whichever level. And this is the level that we've missed. So really, we need to decolonize our financial system, but we also need to ensure we deepen it so that what happened to the cooperative movement, as we are talking about alternative ways, we also need to go back to some of the ways that didn't fit into the neoliberal frame, and so they were swept aside. And the natural way for African development is cooperative. And this is what Markus was saying, our basic social system. It's not possible to even run a cooperative in our setting because the rules and the regulations will actually kill it. So we need to, I'll just end on saying this alternative to the neoliberal framework, I believe, is a proactive proposition. It's not necessarily an alternative. It's just saying there's a better way to do this. And we need to pull together the resources that we have to say that we need to have an economic system that's sustainable, that will lead us towards the SDGs, that will reduce poverty, that will even reduce the conflicts that we're having. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Wanjiru, for highlighting this. And one last question, I think that's related to AI, and definitely it's a buzz now, so the question are more, but I'm just summarizing the most critical one. That we are seeing that AI is also using a lot of energy and energy systems. So isn't it contradicting that we are relying on AI and combating for the climate crisis on the same time? So does it create any contradiction or conflict, and how organizations can actually balance it out?
Yeah, it does. However, I see it is inevitable for progress. So the question is rather, where's the energy source from? In my point of view, and also the materials. I mean, also for the robots, which need batteries, you have materials that have to be sourced and often are being done so in an unjust way. And yeah, if we use fossil fuels to create artificial intelligence, that would be so anachronistic and strange and wrong, because it would destroy our world. So the big businesses, I mean, they do look at that, and it's something to have an eye out for. Yeah. From my perspective as a very quite technical person, I don't think it's nothing I can change, but we have to make sure that those goals don't cross each other. And rather, I think the most pressing challenge or important issue with the climate change, the fight against climate change, is that people have so strong and opposing positions and opinions sometimes. In an optimistic view, AI can help us to moderate those processes and find compromises that maybe are better, in a way. I would hope that we get there, because if you've used AI for a while, you see that it's rather moderated, and it can integrate different viewpoints and so on if you ask it to. So I think it's quite a good function, and maybe could be used more to find the right compromises to deal with climate change. And here with AI, it's about a compromise. I do believe in progress. So if you don't want to go back to stone age times, we have to find just the ways to do it in a green way.
Thanks, Markus. Thanks, Rishi. Before I hand over to Sohini, let me say a few votes of thanks from my side personally, because of course all of you have been somehow inspiring the Civil Society Academy, and also have been important parts of our way. Amitabh, I think when we met first, you were one of the leading figures in the Wadanatolo campaign. No, that's how I met you actually at the time in Delhi. Keep Your Promise campaign, in which was really, and is still in our courses when we talk about networks. It's still one of the networks which we think is extraordinary and successful. And you were leading this, and of course you were also afterwards with us. So thanks for being with us, yeah, and being a role model and being actually what you said. I think you bring back politics and the normative framework to Oxfam and the civil society sector as such. And Markus, yeah, so let me also say a few words about Markus. So Markus has had a very well-paid job in the IT industry, and passionately he was changing his career a few years back, maybe 6 years back, no, or so now, and he was actually on a mission to work on this child growth monitor. Yeah, basically to use IT for good, and this
Yeah,
is also, I
Joachim and
think,
his methods helped ideate the Welthungerhilfe Child Monitor in
yes,
2017, which is
yeah,
now one of the lighthouse innovations of a German NGO,
yeah,
Welthungerhilfe, I think so. And yeah, I've stopped working on it because I see this kind of building open source nonprofit innovation for fighting hunger using AI, yeah, and building sustainable business models around it. It really should be the new meta. I hope to do
yeah,
that with my
yeah.
new business, but
Yeah, this was a fantastic journey, which we had together for some time. And Wanjiru, of course, who is, I think, a fantastic role model in Kenyan civil society, building this organization, the Institute for Social Accountability, with whom we are also working together now. And I think which is really hitting a chord, not only for me personally, but also I think is one of the organization which is, this type of organization is badly needed in many countries, and I think this is really something specially we're building. So thanks for being with us, Wanjiru, and thanks for supporting the Civil Society Academy. So Hini, where are you? I think we're slowly coming to the end.
Yes, thanks, Joachim. And so as a way of wrap up, I would also like to thank our panelists for taking out time and sharing your views on the mega trends. It was really, really interesting. And thanks to all the people who have attended this session. We know that the time was not enough because there were so many questions in the question answer channel. And what we will do is we will not let it go. We will definitely take those questions up and be in touch with you and take it up in our future sessions. So we will keep that in mind. But before we end, I would just like to share with you a little bit about what we are planning to do. That is the Civil Society Academy in 2025. So I hope you can see my screen.
Still coming.
Okay.
Yeah. It's there.
Okay, so these are new. So as you know, most of you who have attended our courses, that we do a lot of impact trainings or open trainings. And like Amitabh mentioned, he was actually a part of our journey from the beginning. He helped us design our training on advocacy. I remember the first training that we had done, Amitabh had helped us design it, but we are continuing with this training. So we have, of course, our flagship courses, Leadership and Management in NGOs. We have our Advocacy and Social Accountability training, which is much needed, like all our panelists just mentioned. And then we have the partnership and coalition building. So the first three that you see on the screen are all happening face to face, physical training workshops this year. And it's all the details are on our website. And the next four is what we are offering online. That is project cycle management for NGOs, fundraising strategy for NGOs, online facilitation, presentation, and leadership essentials. So I just wanted to share this with you. And the next thing is, of course, we have our exceptional leadership masterclass that we have offered ever since we had our first masterclass in 2015. We've been offering it every year. Even during COVID years, we offered it online. And so far, more than 200 leaders have participated in our masterclass, which is a training we have face to face in 2 sessions. And usually we have it in Kenya and Ethiopia. And most of the people who've attended this training have stated that this has been an important course in their career. So we are doing it again this year, starting in July in Kenya. So again, you'll have all the details on our website. Then the last thing that I wanted to share is the launch of new toolboxes and free templates that you can download from our website. So we already have the advocacy and social accountability toolbox. And this year we are going to add a toolbox on leadership and team management, organizational strategy and change, and fundraising for NGOs. So you will be soon have access to these new toolboxes on our website. And along with that, there are certain templates that we wanted to share. So you see, the first two templates are something that you could use. These have been tried and tested on organizational strategy. These templates can help you when you have your strategy discussions to plan out your organizational strategy. And then the next toolbox is on donor mapping, value proposition map. And of course, we have this last template is on analysis of the context in which we are functioning, which is also very, very important considering all the discussions we've just had on the mega trends.